This is bad. People are gonna be mad at us, Jason. No. People are gonna be mad at you, Jason. People are
They're
gonna
gonna
be
be mad at me?
no, they're
Why?
gonna be
What'd I
mad
do?
because last week, remember what we said we were gonna talk about?
We're gonna talk about the metaphysics of worship, right?
That's what we said, Jason. That's
But
what
what
we
are we actually gonna talk about?
why men go to strip clubs.
Oh, well, I'm curious if
No, I
I'm
don't go
gonna
to
get
strip clubs. No, I
any
don't.
engagement.
Wait, that's your new Substack, right? That's so you wrote
That's
two new
yeah.
Substacks. One of them is okay. You got to tell everybody. So you asked me. You said, "What'd you ask me?" You sent me a message.
I think it wasn't it just, hey, would it be okay to write this
I think it was to write it and to title it that.
and to title it that, yeah, and send it out because I think there's because I think it's a real. I mean, I was right. I was just out driving. I was in a different city, and I can't remember what city I was in, and I drove like past a strip club. I was like, oh yeah, because Spokane I don't think has any anymore. Our last one shut down, and um and
Is killing strip clubs.
that's my suspicion, right? Is that
Yeah.
even strip clubs are like too much human interaction. Um, but
Oh no. Okay.
so
It's not what I was
it's
thinking, but yeah. Okay.
um, but and I was like, oh man, that what and having done a lot of counseling with men and you start to realize that the normal way that we go about trying to end certain sins um is isn't super effective and
I tell people stop going to strip clubs. That's not
yeah,
really that effective.
like, hey, have you tried just stopping, that sort of thing. um it-
I don't like that. I
and
don't like that approach personally. I kind of like, hey, you
but
ever
but
try to stop hitting me? People,
right, but the reason that it's not effective is because when we're told to put off sins, it's so that we can put on certain virtues.
mm,
And if we don't fill the hole that's left by the a perpetual sin with the right um devotion to Christ, with the right with the good thing that that you're pushing out with your sin, then what you find is that it's generally ineffective, right? To you, that's not a good way. You can't just put off a sin; you have to also put on righteousness, and so uh, and I was trying to, so I tried to put together a here's here is what here is the fake thing being sold to men in a strip club, and what does it look like to put on the real thing, right? So um the and yeah, I don't know, I could just spoil it, right? Because this
well, I think
Substack
first,
is a different audience.
everybody needs to go to your Substack first of all. But I mean, yeah, sure, go ahead, spoil it. Everybody
Yeah,
needs to get some quality Substack, right? Go there. Wait for your articles. You're doing 2-a-days right now.
I'm trying to do 2 a day this week and see if that makes a difference on engagement. And so, but the um the false thing that's being sold at a strip club is not really fulfillment of lust. Most of the time it's really a fulfillment of respect. um because respect is the thing that men run on. And if
Wait,
it
wait,
and so you are exchanging money for a woman to pretend like she respects you.
wait. Wait. Hold on, all the thoughts just rushed through my head. So men go to strip clubs because they're trying to get respect. They're trying to
Right,
buy
well,
respect from
they're
women.
buying, yeah, they're buying respect. It's fake respect, and
You know,
everybody's kind of in on it. Everybody knows.
that's kind of
um
funny though, dude, because you know what? When we talk about women who strip, it's like she lost her respectability, right? Like it's kind of interesting as you say that. Okay,
yeah,
okay. So she, yeah, okay, I can see that a little bit, but could a man also if that's the case, then strip clubs could technically look different because all a man has to do is to buy a woman's time for her to respect him, right? Like, and I think there's a lot of women who like I would never go strip, but I will act like I respect a man if he's giving me money, right?
Right.
That-
But you think about it, it's the same kind of it's the same sort of there. Strip clubs are kind of the shameless version of it. Um, I've been to. I accidentally or was invited by somebody and didn't know what it was. Went to what was really a gold digger bar. So all these millionaires, men that and all of these like 21 to 25-year-old women that are there looking to be a trophy wife, and everybody else knew, but I was from a different city, and it was an investor meeting, and the guy was like, hey, well, we meet over here, walk in,
Mhm.
and and then somebody told me, oh yeah, this is a gold digger bar, and I was like, oh, we're out. And Marcus and I were like, see you guys, we're not even interested in your money if you hang out at gold digger bars, right? So but it's the exact same
Mm.
thing, right? They're there because they know that it's rich men that hang out here, and you've got like, yeah, so what I respect now, there is something respectable about being able to make money and support a woman, right? That's part of what earns you real respect of a real woman. But a strip club is like a toned down, um, not toned down, like uh, a like an acted out version of that, with no consequences, so to speak, right? Um, so when you to win the respect of a real woman takes an enormous amount uh of concentration and energy and purposefulness, and right, you have to know her, and Paul or Peter talks about studying a woman, and you have to really actually put in real effort, but there's also a risk to it. um, and this is one of the things raising teenagers that you have to help them start to understand, is the process of trying to find a husband or a wife. There's risk involved because you slowly put yourself out there, and sometimes you get rejected, or sometimes you start talking to somebody thinking, oh man, I really like this person. Then you get to know them a little bit better, and you realize, oh, they've got this public face, but the private life I don't like. So and then there's it starts with attraction, and then when you meet the real person, they can be less attractive, or there's just there's a risk involved in the process of trying to find a spouse. But there's a continued risk in marriage because you're always having to put yourself out there and trust a person who is a sinner, right? Who is sometimes going to mishandle what you pass out, what you give them, right? And so there's this continual risk. There's this process of getting to know one another that takes years and years and years because you married somebody made in the image of an incomprehensible God, right? So there's infinite depths of getting to know her, and so that process, which is hard, is the process to get valuable respect,
Mm.
that can't be just exchanged for money, right? The kind of valuable respect that is a crown, um, of real value. A strip club is just a risk-free version of that, in exchange that where you just go in and you pay some money, and she pretends to be a wife for the evening, that sort of thing.
Is it really risk free though?
It's not consequence free, but that's what we tell ourselves, right? I mean, I guess there's also, you know, the risk of STDs and all that, but
Well, I mean, but
but it's not consequence free. That's the lie that goes with it,
there's a
right?
bigger gamble there, though. I think you're still so the risk he knows that when he walks into a strip club to find a woman that is going to act like she's respecting him, he thinks he's really going to get her to in one way or another, or continue to play the game, you
Yeah.
know. So like he's taking a bigger risk.
Right. I mean, in reality, he is, but that's not the story that goes
Tell
on in the head of a man, right?
Mm.
So what the article, and I came at it from a couple of different angles in the article, because what I was trying to do is crack open the story. How do you hear the story you're telling yourself?
Mm.
So, and then preach the gospel in its place, which is a Martin Lloyd-Jones in his book Spiritual Depression. He talks about this, right? That we listen to ourselves, versus rather than talk to ourselves, right? We let the story in our head get going, and we play along rather than in saying, wait, am I telling myself the truth, right? And so when you're telling yourself a lie,
Yeah.
and what you need is something that comes along and cracks open the lie, so that you can then tell yourself the gospel in its place, the good news in its place. And in a world of chaos like this, the clear boundaries and direction of the law is good news, right? So this is because the law says, hey, don't, right? And in a world of chaos where all the rest of the world is telling you the lie that it's actually not a big deal, there's no consequences, there's when the law comes in and sets a clear boundary and says death is on the other side of that boundary, don't go in. Through that door is death, right? That's good news in a world filled with chaos like ours. But the gospel is the empowerment that the gospel empowers us to be able to actually keep the law. And so you don't replace the story in your head with the law. You replace the story in your head with the gospel. And then you replace the sin with the right use of that energy, right? I'm expending my energy in sin. You don't just say, I'm not going to expend that energy anymore, right? You turn and you say, what is that energy designed for, right? So I read oh, actually, I can't tell you about that. It's a great screenplay, but I can't tell you the details because I know it's
Dang
it's
it, we
in
almost got you.
yeah, I almost got myself in trouble.
We
No,
almost got it.
yeah, but it was but what I loved about the screenplay was it actually focused on this. It was really good. But there's so you have to take the energy that you're using in sin and direct it towards something in righteousness, right? So you have to put off sin and put on Christ. How would if I was following Christ, how do I expend this energy?
Mm.
And the right way to expend this energy, which is this desire for respect, which is a good thing, is to pursue the women that you already have in your life. If you're married, to pursue your wife harder. I remember some really great advice I heard Jim Wilson give, where he said, if you're sitting at work and you start thinking bitter thoughts towards your wife, he said, bring her flowers, right? Think. And he said, because that energy, you have to redirect your thoughts towards what does love look like? Not, hey, stop that. You have to say, oh, don't do that. Instead, do
You know,
this, right?
I think we always talk about the spheres of sovereignty and the levels of government that we always, I love talking about that. You actually pander to me in the process. And actually, I think we were talking about it last time, but the reason that's so important is because I can tell that men aren't practicing that by the way they treat other men, right? So if he's treating his wife that way, that when he gets bitter thoughts towards her, someone who is his own flesh, and then he goes and says, you know what, let me redirect that, change the repent, right? Change my mind about this. I'll act the complete opposite way. If he's practicing that, the way that he engages with other people on his job is going to look the same way. So that when he's feeling bitter or acting bitter, he's developed the habit in his own self-government at home, right? To act this way in other spheres. So even when it comes to politics, when it comes to church government, when it comes to business, I can tell people aren't practicing that in their closest environments. And it's funny because like you everyone is at work with someone else that they're probably feeling a little bitter about, and they're trying their best to say, okay, I just need to stuff that down there and not deal with it, right? But we neglect to realize that the Holy Spirit's brought that to our attention, and we have, um, we think that we just need to push it away. Just need to push it away. All right. No, you need to deal with it.
Yeah.
And I think
Well,
that's really helpful.
there might be you might say, okay, this isn't the right time to deal with it, so I'm going to push it away until I get some time later to bring it before the Lord in prayer. But what we tend to do is say, yeah, I don't have a right use for this energy.
Yeah.
And so I'm, and I mean, I see the number of times I type out a response on Twitter and delete it is legion. But it's because I type it out, I read it for typos, and then I read it for is this, do I want to say this? And then I stop and say, oh no, I need to deal with this. This isn't, I don't want to put this on Twitter. So but it's that ability to think, to that secondary thought that says, wait, is this what I want to do? Because if we just act without thoughtfulness, it actually gets us in trouble. There's a really great he's dead now, and I don't think he ever became a Christian. But he was a huge G.K. Chesterton fan, so he was like a one-eyed man, but that could really see sometimes. His name was Terry Pratchett, and he dedicated multiple books to Chesterton. But he has this he has a series of fantasy sci-fi books called Discworld, about a flat Earth, and they're really funny. But there's this character they're called the witches. Everyone thinks they're witches, but really they just think twice about they think their thoughts, and then they think about their thoughts, and it looks like magic to everyone. It's really funny.
I can see that.
And just the ability to say, wait, do I actually want to do this? Is this because so he and that's what it looks like often to act in faith, because you say, wait, am I aligning? Is what I'm about to say, is it going to align with what I actually believe in terms of the promises of God? What I actually believe about the purpose of my jurisdiction, what God gave me this power and authority that I have in this moment to do. Am I acting in line with the gospel, or am I acting against it? Right? Those sorts of questions. We should be able to ask ourselves those on the spot. I mean, Spurgeon says that you can't expect to know in the dark what you didn't know in the light, right? So he says, you have to study the promises of God, study in the terms of concentrate. There's like an academic form of studying, but there's an older definition of the word study, which just means concentrate on or put energy into knowing. And so the promises of God, when you're in the light, when you don't need them, in the same sort of way, you have to make sure that you are putting the energy into knowing the promises of God about things, so that when you need them, because the darkness comes, the pressure comes, the spill comes, you're ready to say, wait, no, what are the promises of God in this situation?
I know, even in my charismatic environment, the definition you gave of study, they had that. Where I would rather, and I think I still feel this way, I would rather be with Holy Ghost filled, tongue speaking, charismatic, who believes their Bible in the time of trouble, than with a person who is a theologian that knows all of it, that doesn't understand, that doesn't really have it inside of them.
Yeah.
And I hate to put those two against each other, but I've found that that's actually a reality. We have some fantastic theologians who are able to help people understand concepts and think through things. But when the rubber meets the road and the fire is hot, those charismatic folks who just study to know, be like, no, this is that time to fight right now. And I think the clearest example of that was during COVID. Like
Yeah.
some of those guys were just like, nah. Now they ain't brought nobody back from the dead, and they ain't really healed too many sick. But when it was time to be like, let's try it. Let's see. Like they have more of a Caleb attitude than the other guys, and I'm
Yeah.
part of the other guys, right? Right. I'm
Right.
part of the other guys, which is always convicting because you go back and you read Caleb. He's like, has God not promised us this? Well, then let's go take that mountain because I'm 80 years old, but I can go in, I come out the same way. I'm strong, so let's do this. They have more of that attitude and probably not. So I wish I could merge together these groups. Like, how do we put these two things together where you got these guys who know it and you got these other guys who really, 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 really believe it, right?
Yeah.
But
I think COVID actually went a long way to doing that because I know in our city, when you look around at which churches said, well, but Jesus didn't give us permission to stop meeting, so we're going to keep meeting, right? You suddenly you found yourself aligned with a different set of churches than you expected. At least in my city, that's what it was. You look around and you say, oh, okay, so I guess here we are, and so writing a letter to the mayor together with those churches, you realize like, okay, this is a serious realignment that God is doing and pushing people together. And I mean, I think that as I've thought about it, I think that that's probably how the reunification of Christendom is going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen because the bureaucrats got together and figured out ways to do it. I think it's like, oh, hey, they have the Spirit, we have the Spirit, and the Spirit pushes us together.
Okay.
I mean, my church, the folks that live across the street from me go to Second Baptist, and they're great folks. I come out in the morning and he'll shout from across the street, "He is risen!" And I shout back, "He is risen indeed!" And we were out talking about yards and stuff, and I was like, "Oh yeah, there's no suspicion because it's just hey, I met another Christian in my neighborhood. They moved in hoping that there would be Christians in the neighborhood, and
I don't trust anybody from Second Baptist. First Baptist,
Second Baptist down on 2nd Street here in Spokane has some of the best music in town.
Second Baptist. There's no second. There's only first. It's only First Baptist.
They're on 2nd Street.
We have to change the name of the street then, Jason.
Look, it's the only black church in Spokane. We can't mess with it.
Oh, okay. Oh, then why they gotta be second? That's even worse. It's the only black church called Second Baptist. Who got the first church?
I didn't name it. When I was in high school, after my church was done, I used to sneak over into the back pew for the music because the music was so good. But the preacher preached like 2.5 hours, and I was white. I didn't have I didn't have the stamina for the 2.5 hour sermon, but the music was always amazing. And I always was like, I want to join the choir, but then I'd have to stay for the whole sermon.
Hey, brothers out there who have black churches, we want y'all to know y'all can have a lot more white people if y'all cut your
sermon down. That was a great. I mean, and he was a great preacher too. I just was 17. I did not have that kind of.
Nobody does, Jason. Nobody does. So I want to jump topics, but before you do, there is something radical happening as it relates to the relationship between those who love the Lord and are seeing the climate, and for the whole Buckner, the kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs. You've seen that whole fallout.
Yeah, that's what my second article was about. It's called today. It was called "Homemaker." Woman, thou art homemaker, and it's good.
Well, we're never gonna get anywhere. My head is racing. I got too many.
They can just read that one.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, but there is this weird thing happening. I saw it happening during COVID, like you said, where the lines of our relationships are being redrawn. And we are in such a dire situation right now that I think it's fatal not to run to the aid of Catholics who are fighting in the same direction we are, right?
Well, there are Catholics who are out there saying that are out there acknowledging reality, and then we're trying to acknowledge reality, and then there's all these people trying to live in unicorn Pretendsville. Um, not let's not call it unicorn because I believe in unicorns. Let's call it
Unicorns are real, but
yeah, unicorns are real. But what's something not real? Mermaids. Mermaid Pretendsville.
mermaids aren't
I know
real.
I'm going to get myself in trouble now with my own people. No, I
Jason,
maybe mermaids are real, but I have my doubts about mermaids.
mhm.
Um, I have confidence about unicorns. I mean, but you've got these people trying to live in Pretendsville, right? Denying reality, saying that my willful decision to define my identity, it make you have to play along or else we'll bring the power of whatever coercive power we've got against you. And you've got Roman Catholics that say, I can still see, like, you still have all the same body parts. Nothing has changed. Reality is what it is. That kind of and then you've got, you know, the you've got Baptist groups bringing, what's the name of that? There's that now, the Baptist transgender uh Flamey Grant is now like being invited to speak at Baptist conferences and stuff. And you've got the Presbyterians over trying to do what was that conference? The Revoice conference, right? So the division is not along denominational lines anymore. The division is along who actually acknowledges reality, um, and who wants to not acknowledge reality. So I think we've got to be more careful, not more careful, just maybe less careful, and just say like, "Oh, you acknowledge reality too." I mean, there's a lot of Baptists shifting straight into Roman Catholicism for that acknowledgement of reality, right? Because you've got these groups, but a lot of those groups are also rejecting their own pope at the moment. So things are not going the way that I
It's
would have
hard.
expected
It's
10
crazy
years ago.
hard. Yeah, and
It's
so
crazy.
what like somebody for me who when I the part of the reason I became reformed is because I liked clear lines. I liked clear lines. You're in, you're out. You're with us, you're against us. There's no, hey, you're on the team, we'll fight this, but no, ain't none of that. Right now, those lines that I came here for, they ain't clear at all. Like,
Right.
and in one sense, I know there's going to be a cleaning, but right now it doesn't seem like it seems like that's not an option, right? It's not an option culturally. And I don't think that we lose our distinctives, but in the battle, there's just kind of like you want to be you want to figure out how to use forces that are going to trample your enemies, right? And man, anyway, that's not what I find that really interesting right now, and I find that a lot of a lot of Christians don't understand or haven't read their Bible to understand biblical strategies at all. Um, or anyway, that's I keep thinking about that and I keep thinking to myself, like, this is gonna get crazier. This is gonna get crazier. And because you got Catholics, and now, I mean, we have to have some sort of group that is not necessarily the church itself that functions in the world that allows people to be politically engaged within the stream of evangelicalism, right? That's led by us and that in one way or another allows them to be a part and not necessarily have to be it, right? I don't know how to do that yet, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know if we're gonna know exactly what to do until it happens, but I
that's
do think
interesting.
I know. But here is the part of the reason is John 3 tells us that when the Spirit moves, one of the things it makes us is unpredictable
Mm,
as a people, right? The spirit-filled people, they blow here and there like the wind. They don't um they you so you end up having the Holy Spirit do things where you go, oh, I didn't see that coming, where you um
mm,
but I also think this is why understanding corporate justification is so important right now, because
mm.
here's what I mean is most people, when they think of justification, they only think in terms of my individual salvation,
Yep.
my justification. And justification is by faith, right? The mark of a saved person is that they trust Jesus, right? That they trust the Lord. That's the mark of salvation is faith and faith alone. And then out of that faith flows love, flows obedience, flows all of these other things that are the acts of a saved person. Um, but the mark of justification is faith and faith alone. Um, but what we don't realize is that that justification means, um, that you're declared right before the Lord, and that uh that justification, biblically speaking, isn't something that is only individual, right? That there's also the reality of what group is declared right before the Lord. And when we don't take into account corporate justification, uh, what we end up doing is we it becomes invisible to us, and so corporate justification ends up being by works rather than by faith, right? So which group is the group that is right with God?
Mm.
It's the group of people that trust the Lord, right? And what does our church, how do we make sure our church is right before the Lord? Well, it's not by works, it's by faith, right? That our corporate justification, our group justification is also by faith in the Bible. We don't have a category for group justification, so we
It,
don't even ask ourselves that question. And so when we meet somebody who's in the wrong group in our mind, but then they have faith in Jesus, we think, well, they we they aren't really justified. I mean, they might be justified at the last day, but we can't treat them as justified because they're not in our group, because the corporate justification is by membership in the group that I'm a part of, rather than saying, well, no, actually, there's the justified group, the corporate justified group of people are the people that trust Jesus. And that's going to cross lines in a different sort of way.
but we
Um,
believe, don't we believe that though? Okay, we got to stop
I
this.
don't think we act that way.
No, but
Maybe we do. Maybe
okay.
we say we do, but I actually don't even see people saying they do.
Well, I first of all, let's acknowledge that we're a schizophrenic bunch, uh,
Yes.
and I think that's a large part of the American Baptistic idea that's kind of floating around. But even so, like we will say, God has blessed America.
Yes.
Well, in order to make that statement, you have to believe in a corporate justification.
Right. But when you say why does he bless America? That's when you find out that we think it's by works.
And I don't know one person who would think that. I think they would say
You're
because
you're talking to different people than me.
I think they would. Oh, well, maybe, of course, maybe. People like me more than you. What are you talking
Yeah, no,
about?
that is true. That is true.
Um, it's really because they just need a black friend. Get all the social justice guilt off of them. Uh, but they would say because America has trusted God, the majority of people here believe and trust in God, and their laws mimic the reality of that trust in the Lord. And so, therefore, America has been blessed because of that. Almost everyone I know who is willing to say, God has blessed America, is willing to make that statement. And this is where the schizophrenia kind of comes into play here. You see what I'm saying? I think they're all willing to make that statement.
But do you think the schizophrenia is because then they say,
I hate when
and
you ask me questions. I hate when you ask me questions because they're not real questions. What they are positioning pieces on the chessboard. You think I don't know, Jason, but I see you. Go ahead. Sure, Jason, you're right. Ain't no real questions. It's the way I would go ahead. Go ahead. Do your check.
You see me do it too many times.
I know you've been doing it to me for 2 years.
Do you think man, now I don't even remember what I had the perfect question formed. Do you think that the reasoning that people give generally actually reflects what they say we ought to do going forward? So when they say, well, yeah, of course, we've been blessed by God because they were majority Christian, right? They were well-educated Christians that understood their story, and they understood the history of the law, and they worked within it to bring about the most freedom that any people group has ever seen. And then they say, and here's what I think we ought to do going forward. Do you think that they bring that reasoning with them into their plans for what to do next?
No. In the same way that, no, I don't think they do. That's what I mean by the schizophrenic part, though, right?
Yeah.
I just saw somebody on Facebook sit up there and videotape their child memorizing the Psalms, quoting the Psalms, so that they can bless someone else, right, with the Psalm. And I sat up there, and my question was, please tell me that you've baptized this child. So you see the schizophrenic part here, where it's like, okay, my child has learned all these Bible verses so that they can bless you, right? But I won't baptize the baby because I'm not sure that whatever this is that's happening here is the work of the Holy Spirit in them. But somehow this is going to be you see, like, so I understand the schizophrenic part, but my point is that I'm sure I have somewhere something like that going on with me too. But my point is that I think it's easy for us to accept the historical realities of a justified, how'd you say it? Corporate justification.
Corporate justification, yeah.
But it's not practically something that we work, even Facebook's agreement or whatever this is.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not something that we know how to practically work towards in our current situation. Which is what scares me, like, as we move forward politically. And you said the Spirit moved back and forth here and there, so I trust that. And that's the kind of the hope that I have, is that as the Spirit is moving, the Spirit moves and deals with our idiosyncrasies and schizophrenia at the same time.
Yeah. it does, and I think, but it also, this one of the things the Spirit does is heal that schizophrenia, because Paul talks about one of the things that he prays for himself to live in, but also one of the things that he's prays for other churches is simplicity, which means undividedness. And right now there's a lot of dividedness within a person, but also within our churches, within everything, right? And so simplicity, in theological terms, we talk about the simplicity of God, that God doesn't have parts or passions, and that's a really important doctrinal understanding, that he isn't divided within himself, but that his nature is simple, or there's only a single nature. But one of the things that sin does is it makes us divided within ourselves. And within ourselves, that dividedness within ourselves is expressed in that kind of simplicity. We don't have a single will, right? We have multiple wills. And Paul talks about how I want this and I want that, right? I want this and but I do this, right? That we've got this dividedness that comes from sin. uh, it's particularly bad right now in modern America, uh e- because and I mean, we people talk about, oh, there's a mental health crisis, and a lot of Christians are like, no, it's not a mental health crisis, we but the it is we the what we actually disagree on is the metaphysic of the person, not whether or not we're in a mental health crisis. What
Mm,
we disagree on is that mental is not simple biology, that mental is not that you're not dealing with a mechanism issue with mental health, that because Paul talks about the dividedness of the self, the dividedness of self experience,
I
the
want to
dividedness of
live
the will.
is present. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that's not a new thing. That's something that we've been dealing with. The reason it's dealt with as a crisis now is because through the work of the church throughout the last 2,000 years, through the work of the Christendom, and through the work of a generally united church over a couple of millennia, you started people started to expect simplicity within their own self experience of their self. Right. So you look at people 300, 400, 500 years ago, they didn't have these sorts of mental health issues. You look at you look at even, soldiers coming home from war. um, they had the church and the family and the civic structure, when it was working well, they had a way to reintegrate people, and so you didn't have the same sort of PTSD issues. When you have somebody that has real that is really struggling, um, they had ways of helping people reunite their self experience within themselves, and people knew their place in society. They understood their place in the cosmos. They understood uh, what it looked like, what they knew what to expect of their life, and their life delivered. Right. There was suffering, there was still difficulty, but you didn't have the divided selfhood in its experience. You begin seeing, or you did, but not in this to the same extent, not at this
Right.
crisis level.
Right. Right. Keep going.
But you begin seeing that uh, when you start having this mechanistic view of the universe, combined with the expectation that I'm going to have uh, mental that my mental experience of my own selfhood is going to be singular. And so then when it goes away, people say we don't have a solution, right? So you get a crisis at this level, um, because when Jesus came in and started reuniting people over generations, reuniting people within themselves, reuniting people across borders, reuniting people across cultures, uh, that peace became the expectation.
Mm,
But then they tried to keep
mm.
the peace and get rid of Jesus. And the question, you don't get to go back to, say, paganism or something, right? All of that was defeated, all of it is gone. And so what you end up with is this nothingness that is left where Jesus used to be. And then people trying to cross the chasm of the void of nothingness within their with by an act of the will, and expecting to get so they're basically replacing the position that Jesus held, in relation as the integration point of all things within our mind, within our thought pattern, within our culture, with an act of the individual will, right? And so you end up with this iron differentiation between our experience of ourself and our selfhood. Right? You end up with severe mental health problems because Jesus used to be the one that sat up in that position, and we're trying to, by an act of the will, put ourselves in the position of Christ. but it divides ourselves because we're also in the position that we used to be in, which is the one we're a part of. We're a part of the of society. We're a part of our own self experience. We're over here and we're over there at the same time, mentally, right? We're both ourself and we're our own Messiah, right? And since it doesn't work that way, by an act of the will, we're our own Messiah. And since it doesn't actually work that way, what you end up with is this division within our selfhood, division within our self experience, division within our mind, right? And uh, what we're seeing is that space. There's all sorts of demons that are happy to slip into that space that we're creating within our self experience, within our selfhood, with the promise of power, the promise that I can put you right. I can actually make it so that you have the power to do the things that you think you need to do. And so the inrush of uh, of the demonic isn't a surprise when you understand what's going on. Because in the ancient pagan world, there's really a couple of different kinds of ancient paganism. But in the ancient paganism, there was always some demon that held that position that Christ holds now, right? Or there was sometimes some sort of angel or nature, or but in the paganism, as we think of it, we needed someone to sit on that throne, and the demons were happy to oblige, right? And that was how the undivided self was restored. Now we're trying to we cast Jesus came and casted all the demons by word and sacrament. He spread spread his people by the power of the Holy Spirit, spread his people throughout the world, and as they went, they cleansed it. They cleansed the world of a lot of these personal beings, these demonic personal beings, as well as kind of the demonic thought structures that went with them.
Principalities and powers and rulers.
Principalities and powers. Yep. So, but then we've tried to say, well, let's live as if Jesus isn't on that throne anymore. But there's no place left to the demons are gone. so you've got this empty space now. So it really is a crisis of mental health. It's just not a crisis of mechanistic
Oh, we can't.
mental health. And the solution is worship. The restoration of worship. Is this what we plan on talking about? I can't remember.
No, but it's so good because I think it gets to the point where eventually we get there. Because Jason, I got like a bunch of notes of stuff I want to talk about from just this conversation. So if I went through my notebook, we'd have another 3 years of conversations to chat about. But we were supposed to talk about the metaphysics of worship, right?
Right.
But I have to go here. Is this to me seems like it's really related to eschatology and the reign of Christ, because I think that everything you just said has to do with how you view what happened at the resurrection of Christ. Because if Christ isn't ruling and reigning right now, then that seat's open for right on earth, right? If he's not ruling and reigning the earth, then that seat is still open for demons and other people to rule, and we really don't have nothing to say about it for the most part. And we've created this separation between the ruling, the throne rights of the world, right? And have moved man. We've done two things: moved man and God from it, because the God man Jesus, he's perfectly designed to rule, right? And so we've removed. So then we've almost allowed, or we don't even fight for. The cleansing part of it is not something we even when you talk about that, that was really interesting. The cleansing part isn't even something that we seek after anymore.
Right.
Right. So I don't know. I don't know why, if a Christian goes into a nation with the gospel of Jesus Christ to drive out wickedness and to save souls, let's just put then there isn't one thing or one area in that society that they're not going to touch with the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Absolutely.
And if that's the case, then they better have a good ethic on how they plan to deal with people who eat each other. Or people who leave their wives, or people who are still, they got to have something to be able to put into place to say, no, you don't get to sit in the top throne. Christ is, so obey him. And I don't know how that isn't, at the end of the day, that is all a post-millennial perspective. You can't get there. I don't know what else you think you're doing. And I think since we've lost that, and our own understanding of theology and what we think we're doing is putting us in the position that we're currently in right now, where we're, for the most part, being led away by our own lust and desires and passions, because we put humans back on that throne as if Christ didn't die and raise from the dead, and all authority in heaven and on earth was given to him. Right?
Yeah. And I think
Which gets to worship. I just want to say that I'm setting that up. See how
it
good
does. It does get to worship, but I also think that it is that one of the things I think we don't realize the cosmological nature of the cross
I
and
lost
the resurrection.
I thought we were going to make it through the show without seeing cosmology. All right, go ahead.
Man, I don't make it through my normal day without talking about cosmology.
Amen.
But what I mean is, when Jesus was arrested,
Mm-hmm.
when Jesus was born, right, that it started there, but it was sneaking in from that side. And then when Jesus is arrested, it's described as the beginning of a cosmological shift in the way that the world is organized, right? That the cosmos is shifting its authority structure. So you have in the Old Testament, you have an authority structure that's established by God, and then that goes wrong because of Adam's sin, right? So the Old Testament, you have this authority structure where you've got heavenly authorities, the sun, the moon, and the stars, and then you have earthly authorities, the elements, the elementals, you've got the stoicheia, is the Greek word for it. So God establishes a bunch of authority structures that are decentralized authority structures. And Adam, in my understanding, Adam is then he's both given dominion and told to go get dominion, right? So that he's given dominion in kind of a he's given the authority to go out and take those authority structures that are in the world where Adam hasn't gone yet, to take those under his loving care. So you've got, say, an angel that is assigned to an area, let's say down the river. Well, we'll use modern, even though I think the flood actually changed the geography of the world. We'll use modern geography just for an example. So let's say you've got Australia, right? You've got Australia, and there's a bunch of animals there. There's Stoicheia, which is the angelic, or a superstructure, a spiritual superstructure of authority, that we would call angels. There's in English, it doesn't fit the Hebrew word angel because it's a different sort of thing, because the Hebrew word angel has to do with a particular kind of supernatural being, above, they're above our nature. They're not above nature as a concept, but they're above our nature, right? And so, but they're there as God puts them in place as tutors, we're told, as sub-regents, temporary rulers. They're taking care of it in order to wait for Adam's seed to get there, so that it's ready for Adam's seed when they arrive down in Australia to and begin shifting the dominion of these stoicheia to the eschatological intended dominion of mankind, right? And so then mankind is then going to garden it and bring it to its intended end, lift it up to the Lord as a in worship, and then in worship the whole world is going to find, as it's transformed and brought before the Lord, the world is going to discover what it was for under the dominion of Adam, right? That's what dominion is for. It brings a thing to its intended end. So they're going to find fruit down in Australia. They're going to take that fruit, they're going to juice it, and they're going to turn it into wine, and then they're going to take that wine before the Lord, and that fruit is going to reach its intended end as before the Lord, and that sacrificial act is going to bring the world to what it's intended to be. You see this with language, right? When language becomes poetry, it becomes poetry in order to win a woman. It becomes poetry in order to describe life. It becomes and eventually it also becomes poetry sung before the Lord, and you discover that's what language is for. That's the place where language becomes what it was intended to be ultimately. And interestingly enough, it also is how language is preserved over time. When a people stop worshiping, their language degrades. A people that worship, their language moves. It actually improves, right? The worship Jesus, their language actually improves. So you think of something, you think of places where they continue to sing older hymns. Vocabulary is larger in those areas because the vocab ends up in hymns. The vocab ends up used. Old words end up continue to be used. You come along and somebody says, "Oh, now, hey, what does your church do for the Sursum Corda?" And they say, "Oh, our church uses the Sursum Corda this way." And you realize, oh, Latin and the roots of Latin continue to be in use in liturgical areas, even where people aren't learning Latin. And what was really interesting is I was talking to somebody recently who they said, "Oh yeah, I go to a Latin mass." We've got a really big, vibrant Latin mass church in North Idaho. 5 services, four generations represented in every service. It's very vibrant. They're having lots of kids. And I was talking to somebody that went to it, and I said, what's it like going to church where you don't understand what's going on? And he said, "What do you mean? It's not that much Latin. I know what it all means, and my kids know what it all means," right? The Latin is continuing to be is actually in use in those settings. And so language that but when a culture moves away from worship, then the guiding use of their Latin becomes just pop culture, right? Whatever it is. So you've got the degradation of language, but when you've got people taking dominion, right? When you've got people moving towards their own humanity, their humanity is being restored. They're moving, and then their humanity is moving towards the dominion of the world. Those things improve and they move towards their intended end over time, right? So it's not, it's not like, oh, everybody goes in and memorizes the dictionary. It just becomes it's used again, right? The salt, the salt of the gospel preserves everything human, um, because
Mm.
as humanity is brought before the Lord, the gospel preserves it. Uh, so the so if that is what Adam was intended to have, and then eventually it was going to be lifted up to the Father. That's what I think. If there wasn't sin, what the first Adam would have done. It makes complete sense that when Jesus arrives, that's what he does. But what we don't realize is that all of those authorities, because of the sin of Adam, all of those authorities went wrong. Right?
Mm.
All of those authorities in the earth, the stoicheia, went wrong. So if you've got, let's say, a spirit, an angel creature who's been given the job of, let's say, protecting the Congo, the protecting the Congolese river, for example. Right, that's what this angelic being's job is. Well, when mankind shows up, um, he, if he's on God, if the angel is still on God's side, he may have to oppose mankind when mankind shows up, right?
Mm.
So you've got all these ancient stories of beings that, let's say, protect a river over against people, or they protect an area of
No,
right.
no.
They
Don't you
they
do that to my head. Don't you do that. No, you can't do that.
that's the
No.
so you've got stories of what these stoicheia are doing all over the place, but then
No.
you also have some of the stoicheia go wrong, because we're told in the Bible that some of the stoicheia went with Satan. So let's say people show up in a forest that's being protected by an angelic being, and now it's following Satan. Well, now it's going to hate humanity because it's the image of God, and so you've got those sorts of stories as well, where you've got a dark forest where people show up and they never come back. Right, you've got, when you and maybe there's some sort of medicine man who lives in there who uh
He's a
who
priest to those.
kills people as a priest to those
Yep.
demons,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So you've
Yep.
got this so you've got a world where it because mankind is not aligned with God, it doesn't matter if the spirit is or is not aligned with God. It's not going to go well. Now, sometimes you've got those, like the stories of the angelic beings up in Alaska, for example, that are taking care of a group of people, and those people seem to be continuing to serve God under the Noahic covenant. And there, you've got an angel that shows up once a generation, that guides them to where the whales are when they're to hunt, and then tells them, okay, in this generation, men are going to show up with the words of life bound in a book. Listen to them and follow them, and then they never speak again, because they've been handed off to the church. Right, so you've got stories like that too. um
I don't have a
so
place in my theology, Jason. I don't have a
there's an
place.
amazing story in Bede, where you've got
Stop it.
so you've got the king of London, who has a wizard that sits with him, to protect him from the wizards of other kings who try to send curses and stuff and send demons, and this wizard is sitting there, and Augustine shows up. Augustine the missionary, Augustine of Canterbury, shows up, and the wizard says, don't talk to them today. Don't tell them that you will meet them under the magic tree that will protect you from lying spirits. Right, so they've got this tree that's supposedly possessed by a truth spirit, and so you have to so if you're standing in the shadow of it, you can only tell the truth. And so then we know we can trust these people, and they're not going to trick you with their demons. And so the next day they meet under this truth tree, and he says, I'm here as a representative of the Pope. It was the Pope, as Pope had not really been invented. It was a title that the Bishop of Rome had, and he sends his greetings, and he acknowledges your authority, but we've got a message from the King who is over all kings, who is Jesus, who's the Son of God, about how about it's time for you to submit to him and submit your kingdom to him, because he's the one who's established your authority. And he said, and the wizard says, I don't trust these people. Send them over into the demon possessed forest. Give them that space of land. And so they say, oh, okay, great. And they think what's going to happen is they're going to go in and never come out, because that's what always happens. Instead, what happens is the demons flee before them, and they end up building the first the it's not the first church in England, but they end up building a church because they're the Welsh who had been there before had already been converted and then pushed into Wales. But it's the first Anglo-Saxon church ends up being built out of the wood of the demon-possessed forest, right? And everybody goes, oh, okay, so apparently this god that they're representing is stronger than the Stoicheia that lived in that forest. And so then you have them beginning to develop this relationship, and they with the king, and we don't know exactly when he converts, because he ends up literally just coming forward at a church service and getting baptized, and they didn't mark it out as the king, because there were so many people that came forward in that particular moment to get baptized that they didn't notice that they had baptized the king, because the king was so humbled by the gospel that he joined his own people in a baptism in the baptisms, which is something that wouldn't have, I mean, that it that in and of itself tells you how effective the gospel is in bringing freedom with it as it comes along, right? So they ended up baptizing 200,000 people in 2 years, after a period of time where they just faithfully worked, and they drained swamps, they turned places that had been in uninhabitable land in, what was that?
They drained Washington?
Yeah, exactly. They turned uninhabitable land into really prosperous farms, and the people would come over and they would say, how did you do that? And they would say, well, here's our tools, here's how to make them, and they taught them the best practices of farming, and they were so generous that they won the people over. But it started because the Stoicheia that had been keeping these Anglo-Saxons afraid of expanding the world and taking dominion beyond their little area were fled before this gospel preaching group of men. So it's and that's what's happened throughout the whole world, right? And so when the church goes bad and stops preaching the gospel and buys into this cosmology, and a people tries to remove Jesus from the setup, you don't, and those demons are gone, so you can't go back to it, right? So you end up with emptiness, you end up with nothingness, you end up with uh uh you you end up with the nothing, right? And so a metaphysical nothing, right? People literally, they don't believe in things anymore, right? They don't believe, they what is a tree? Well, a tree is, it's not a thing. It happens to be in this shape because of the coercive force of physics on the laws of biology pushed it into this particular shape. But a tree isn't a thing. It's what it happens to be, right? A tree is what is shaped by the puddle of the whole of puddle, the whole of forces around a tree caused the puddle to form in that shape, the way water becomes the shape of things around it, because we don't believe in a metaphysical reality to things, a metaphysical nature to things. So we end up buying into the belief that there is matter and there's force and there's nothing else, right? There's matter and energy, and that's what everything is made of. There's just and so there's no place to move. You can't move back to the old world, because the demonic structure, or the stoichaic structure, is gone. It's been replaced. Jesus took all authority in heaven and earth to himself, the same way Adam held it, and then is his people as his. This is why I think the chapter that Romans 16 is so important, when he says to the church that God will soon crush Satan underneath your feet, right? That the church, as it walks throughout the world, one of the things it is the feet of Christ, and one of the things the feet of Christ do is
Crush
they
serpent's head.
crush serpents'
Promise.
heads, right?
Yeah.
So you've got this restoration of the original mission of Adam that the second Adam is given, which is go out into the world and bring the world under the authority. Because the world is under the authority of Christ, go out and bring it under the authority of Christ and bring it to its intended end. Now the difference is the stoicheia is well, I would say the difference is the world now groans under the corruption of death. We're having to undo the curse of death as we go, and as well, and they wouldn't have had to do that. Adam and Eve and their children wouldn't have had to do that without the fall. But it's the same mission, and the heart of it is still worship, right? We go out worshiping, and the shadows flee before us. So, but but we've stopped kind of. We don't really. Most of our worship services are really just like Bible studies, because there's no sacraments, or there's no sacramental worship. There's no renewal. There's no
power. A lot of the
power
services are weak to do what they need to do.
Yeah, and I think we've sort of said. I mean, so the first group that did Bible study worship services, where you would come together and you would sing and have a lecture, were Unitarians. So the Unitarians developed a worship service where they would call it a worship service, but they would say, well, it's really the temple of your mind is where the worship happens. So you would come in and you would sit and you might sing a couple of songs, sing a couple of hymns, and then you would have a lecture of some sort, and with something to think about for the week. And then and now most of our church services are Unitarian-ish in their liturgical structure. So I look at it and I'm like, well, it's kind of no wonder that we're filling up with we've got a mental health crisis, that we've got demonic activity happening again, that you've got, is because the church has just seeded the ground, left and right and every direction. And the problem is, once the ground is seeded, you have to win it back. So it's not like we can say, let's just go back to the way it was. Let's go back to the way it was before. You actually just have to seed the ground. I mean, once you've seeded the ground, you have to win it back. But the way it's won back is by means of reestablishing worship, reestablishing the historic practices of the church, and then by faith, advancing again. You've taking all things in under dominion again.
You've had like 3 rants on here that have been just phenomenal today, and
yeah, none of these were the things I planned on talking about. I've been thinking about the metaphysics of worship all week to prep.
That's your introduction to the metaphysics of worship. What was that?
I mean, that really is I think the introduction to the metaphysics of worship. So we didn't get a chance to.
What do you have? You have notes in front of you?
Do I have what?
You have notes in front of you?
No.
Oh, okay. I'm just wondering, is like, what did you want to talk about? Like, how else would what else? I thought that maybe you had just walked right into your introduction of what you wanted to talk about today. That wasn't it. What
No,
did you want to talk about?
I should start making notes. No, I don't really make notes. I That's a good idea though.
What did you? What did you? Wait. What did you think you were going to talk about? Like, what were you going to say?
Well, I I thought we'd maybe talk a little bit about like like why liturgy and posture and what's what a sacrament, why sacraments are more than a memorial, or
Okay, no, we'll save that for next week.
okay.
We'll put that one on. I need this was really great because yeah, that was fantastic. You know, bro, I'm gonna say some stuff. I don't think people are gonna like it, but um, I think our show. I said something in the last show where I was like, you know, everything I want. Have you started your podcast yet?
I've recorded some, but I got to get out ahead because I work in fits and starts. I've
Okay,
realized. So
are they good?
I don't know. It's
Uh-oh.
hard to tell when
Your audience will tell you if they're good or not.
yeah,
Find out.
exactly.
But I had said last show, I was like, I've finished now. I've done all that I need to do. Jason Farley is starting the podcast. It's phenomenal. I can go away. And man, you just went on like 3 rants. And like, I think halfway through the second one, I'm like, I don't need to be here anymore. I don't need to. I don't need to be here anymore. I mean, I want to listen to all of them. The whole reason we're doing this is because you stopped doing Westminster Confession of Funk, and I came late to the game, like I always do. And I started listening to Westminster Confession of Funk, and I'm like, where's the rest? And so we started talking. I was like, I'm recording these. And the fact that you're going to start podcasting again is everything to me. And it's just like, maybe what we got to figure out how to do, and this is going to make a lot of people upset, is how to transfer this to that. Because, man, like, yes.
Well, the reason I stopped the Westminster Confession of Funk, I mean, one, it wasn't really gaining much of an audience, but really it was because I had to start delivering groceries to support my family, and I decided I didn't have time to do it anymore. That was what shut it down. So I'm hoping that the Substack I can
All right. So
gives
here's the deal.
gives people the ability to support it, I guess, so that I can keep doing it. Because
Say less.
uh,
Everybody needs to go to Jason Farley's Substack, become a member, support it, because I don't know where I'm going to find this type of content that you just espoused in the last hour and 20 minutes. And I don't know where I'm going to find this type of context of it anywhere. And it needs to exist. It's the kind of things that I need to ponder. It seems, you know, it's funny. The more and more we've talked, it seems to me this makes. It's not that it's making the world a more interesting place. It's making sense of the world that I know exists. I keep on trying to fit the world in a particular type of package, and it doesn't work. And when you're talking about this, it's like, wait, this makes way more sense to me. Like this, biblically speaking, it makes way more. Dominion makes way more sense. How we tell the stories about reality and making sense of the world and applying the scriptures to it, understanding, okay, Adam's dominion, these angels, spirits, whatever they are that are managing it for Adam to get there to hand off. Then when you see Jesus come and all the heavenly hosts sing his praise because finally they get to hand off their authority to him, like all of a sudden this stuff becomes massively robust. You're like, wait a second, this makes way more sense. And just the understandings of rulers and authorities, and what Christ did on the cross, defeating the demons, being put on the throne, ruling and reigning, and then us trying to usurp his authority. It's funny. I was heard. I'm gonna say this and I'm gonna shut up. I heard not Jordan, Lightheart, Peter Lightheart. I think it's the 4 Gospels. He talks about this between
mhm.
the Old Testament and the New Testament, and he says, you know, you got to remember, all of Israel's enemies were defeated. Like God had defeated all of Israel's enemies. It was silver. They were the ones. And then there was King Cyrus?
Yeah,
Who basically has the mandate. Basically, all authority has been given to me. Let's go make the world Christian, or in that, Jewish, whatever you want to call
Yeah.
it. But he's going to go take the meaning of the whole world and bring that. And they didn't put the priesthood right.
Right.
They messed up, and they didn't put the priesthood right, and they didn't become slaves to other people as much as they became slaves to demons. So by the time you get into the New Testament, demons are their masters. Demons are ruling over them, and they don't even know they're enslaved. And that's why when Jesus comes on the scene, like, who have we been slaves to?
Yeah.
Right?
Because there's no giants, there's no Assyrians left, there's no Philistines left. So they cleansed the house, and then 7 demons worse than the original came in, and that's why as he goes around casting out demons out of Jews in the synagogue, right? He goes into the synagogue,
Well,
and the demons hop up in the pews, and they're like, "Have you come to cast us all out?" Like, what? We're here in the synagogue. What's going on, right? And but it is because they hadn't devoted themselves single-heartedly to worship of the worship of the Lord. But what's interesting too is when Rome tried to put up an eagle in the front of the temple, just to say, which was supposed to be a way of saying that, hey, we approve of what's going on here. They had a riot because we don't put images in worship, right? So theologically, they were still resisting the second commandment, but they had actually turned, but they weren't actually worshiping properly. So it's, Josephus tells about the riot that they were ready to tear people to shreds because they were trying to put up a Roman eagle in the worship, within the worship area of the temple, and they were like, no images, right? We'll murder before we'll let you put any images up in here. And but it wasn't actually the good, true worship.
That scares me, because we don't know when it seems like we are blind to the fact when God writes Ichabod over the top of the door, that we think we don't understand that he's done that. We don't understand. And so then we feel, then when we fight for something that seems right, like, yeah, you don't that wasn't a wrong. You don't put images in. That's
not the wrong impulse.
Right. But we've lost something. But because we're fighting for the right thing, we feel justified that we're still in fellowship with God. And
because we have turned our corporate worship into salvation by works, justification by works. Right. So our corporate justification has to be by faith. Faith has to be the thing that marks us out as a people.
Yo, if nobody else's head,
we have to fight for that.
There's no works. There's no works. There's no anywhere in any sphere of government. There's no works that justify in the personal side, self-government. There's no works that justify in the family government. There's no works that justify in the church. There's no works that justify in the civil. And somehow, though, we seem to think that justification by works only is only a issue that's inside of the church, but justification by works is an issue that's in all 4 governments. You don't get to use works to be justified in any sphere of government.
No, there's nothing that will transform your parenting more than realizing that your family is justified by faith and not by works.
So then, what does justification by works look like, though? We're not going to get out of here.
Fear.
Okay. Fear. Okay.
That's what it looks like in the family. Is that what you're going to ask?
No. I was just thinking about, like, I think we know what justification by works looks like in the church. I think we do. Because what we'll say is, in order for you to become a Christian, you have to believe that Jesus has washed and cleansed you and died for your sins, that you were buried with him, death and resurrection, Christ's righteousness applied to you, nothing that you've done of your own to get it. You haven't earned it. It is a free gift given to you by the Lord Jesus Christ. And he is also giving you faith so that you believe it. Right?
Right.
And that's how you latch onto it. And so everything that you do is through the Spirit's working in you to believe this and trust it. And through that work of Christ, you are justified. Right?
Right. Right.
How?
So then you go to your family and you say, we are justified by faith. So I am justified by faith, everyone's comfortable with. But when you go to your family, you say, we are justified by faith and not by works. My kids don't turn out because I get my spanking regiment right. My kids don't turn out because we found the right congregation and we went to it. My kids don't turn out right because we protected them from bad media influences.
We got family worship right every night.
We got family worship right every night. That right. Why do your kids turn out right? It's a gift from Jesus. Right. And there's no other right. And we know this when it comes to individual salvation.
That's right.
But when you say this to people, they start saying immediately, well, but do I sin that grace may abound? Right. In my family, right? Aren't I supposed to do don't I have to do all those things? Aren't those? And you say works flow from faith. Faith doesn't flow from works.
Yeah, that's right.
So then you say, well, but I don't have control over if my kids turn out or not. You're like, you're getting it, right? At the
civil too, then, right? Like it's the same exact thing.
Same thing in the civil, right? So when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, God gives the gift of children that love him, and he promises to do it, right? And that promise becomes ours by trust.
That's my eyes choose the wrong time to water. I mean, what you said was really good, and it really hit my heart. But man, it's like the perfect match. Trust me. When I cry, it's ugly.
Yeah, and then you hit that civil realm, and then it's really hard to start saying justification for a nation is by faith. Right. And there's plenty of promises for nations, right? You don't have to go far before you start running into promises for nations. I mean, and then there are certain nations that God even gave very particular promises to when you read the prophets, which is like, hey, Egypt, hey, Ethiopia, right? He starts talking to particular nations. And I think that the book of Revelation teaches us that all of those promises for every nation, for Israel and for the rest of the nations, that they all analogically translate over to any nation, right? Any nation in the world can look at those promises and say, if I as a nation, if we as a nation trust in the Lord, humble ourselves and trust in the Lord, then he will bless us, right? And the first blessing, Psalm 119 tells us that the first blessing that he grants is obedience, right? And then the obedience brings other blessings in, but the obedience itself is a gift in the first place, right? So a blessed person obeys the Lord. So the psalmist tells us. It doesn't say an obedient person is blessed by the Lord. He says a blessed person obeys the Lord, right? So and then embedded in the obedience is all sorts of blessings that flow in with the obedience, but faith comes first, justification comes first before sanctification.
Oh my goodness, we can talk about that forever. I can go another 45 minutes talking about how we're trying to wield, in the Old Testament, when I believe it's Samuel, they go out to battle, they get whooped. Then they said, hey, let's go grab the ark. And they say,
Eli's sons.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly.
Judges.
Like, God, go do the thing where you go fight for us.
Right.
Like, you're ours. Go do the thing. You go do You do it, do the thing.
Yeah.
And they
But
even
Eli's sons, they first show up and they're like, oh no, when I get back, we can finish that talk about bribery and I'll go and hey, my prostitute's gonna have to wait. Grab the ark. We're gonna go to right there.
hey, we're gonna talk about that strip club when I come back and why I
Well,
was
yeah,
going. But until then, yo, grab that ark and let's go out
grab
there
that ark. Yeah,
and shake God like he's a genie and get him to do the things we want him to do. Right? Like
yeah.
it was like, you don't genie God. Like, and that's the idea of works, isn't it? It's like
It is. Yeah,
I'm gonna genie God to do something for me. Right. And this is the scary part about it, is that just like you were talking about, we can be inside of this theological reality and understand all of it just like the Jews did, and then be mad about the right things, the morally right things, and yet at the same time still being trying to genie God.
mm-hmm.
Right? And not even know that's what we're doing, because when we look at the sheet, it looks right. No idols. We like that one. You know, first,
Yeah,
we're not breaking the Sabbath. Boom, 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 boom. And we can look like, and yet we're not even on. We're completely off the sheet. We've
yeah,
adjusted the score sheet to look good because we don't really know what God requires of us.
yeah. And at
Or we
the end
don't.
of the day, if we got it, we wouldn't say thank you for it,
Oh,
which is what Romans 1 tells us
oh,
is the heart of idolatry.
oh. I'm still in that one too.
Because I think we think if we get America back, it's gonna be because it was by an act of the will that we got America back, not a gift from God. And it's hard because a lot of these, this is like the Christian nationalist dudes. You look at them and you're like, well, we're on the same side on this, right? And um, I don't think that they're a monolithic group, anything like that. But definitely, I've seen some of them react to the way Doug said, "Well, you don't save this world, you don't save the country through laws." A whole bunch of them. Um, there were many of them. I
No,
don't want to talk percentages, but there were those that said,
large,
"Sure you do,
yeah,
sure
large
you do."
large percentage. Bro, I've gotten in so many arguments with them. Like, I don't care how many fences or how high you build your fences. If this is the thing that bothers me, is like, y'all ain't read your Bibles, have you? Like, me and my wife and kids were talking about this. Is like, if you, okay, gotta stay you, like, stop saying that. If you think that you trust in your chariots, if you trust in your fences, and then, oh, we're not trust. If you think you're going to build a wall tall enough, have more weapons, and stop those guys from getting, and think you're going to bypass God fighting for you and protecting you, good luck, buddy. You're not going to make it, because you can have nothing, absolutely nothing, no structure in government, no boundaries or borders, nothing but pure worship and right relationship with God, and angels will fight for you. We don't believe that. Because if
Yeah,
we did, then the thing that we fight, and I'm not saying we don't fight for structures and orders in our constitution and things that are built. I'm not saying that. I am saying if you can have all of that, but not have God, and all you're doing is trying to shake the ark to get God to do something for you. God, we've
yeah,
elected the right person. God, we built the right walls. God, it doesn't matter if you've done all that and without truly, like, it's justified by faith in Jesus.
right.
It's it. That's your protection. That's your wall. That's it. And then after that, though, because that is right, worship, everything else flows from that. And my argument is, if you don't get the flow right, it doesn't matter what you do.
Right.
And I don't know why that's a hard conversation for people to have. And the fact that people bump up against it is like, yo, wherever me and you seem like we're going the same direction, but I feel like I'm still gonna be under judgment when I'm with you.
I mean, I think I remember when I was a very new Christian, my uncle, who's reformed, charismatic, wonderful, faithful pastor for years and years, and sitting in his Bible study, and he said, uh, now the human heart is always going to try and find ways to justify itself by works, and so we have to constantly be returning to justification by faith. And I remember thinking, there's just no way. I was a new Christian, very excited, and had my uh like I you know and having a good wife that helps me remember, like, well, you remember, you right. There's no way you would have ever been justified by works. Like, yeah, I remember that. And I at the time thinking, that can't possibly be. How could anyone? And then you look back, 25 years later, and you're like, man, I fight justification by faith. My pride fights it. I want to be able to say, well, yeah, God, God did that, but I mean, I helped, right? You say, so we want to be able to. We want something we don't have to say thank you for, but it's all grace, top to bottom, all the time, beginning to end. It's all grace, and at the end of the day, we have to we just look at the Lord and say, "Oh man, thank you so much." And this is what justification by faith in a family looks like, is the number of times you say to your kids, like, aren't you glad Jesus died for us? Because whew, we are a messed up bunch without him. Like, we don't have a hope, but Jesus died for us. So we're grateful, and we can live from that, rather than feel like we have to live to it.